So we are past our magic 1,000-person mark. So that's our cue to get started. So let me start with you, Alon Goldenberg. For those of you who don't know, he was in charge of situations just like this at the Pentagon. What happens if Israel starts striking Iran? So he knows this subject just about better than anyone. Um, First of all, Alon, Netanyahu said they had to go now. This is preemptive. Iran's about to put together a nuclear weapon. Do we have any evidence at this point that that was true? And what are the implications if he wasn't being completely on the level with us and the rest of the world?
Yeah, no, we really don't have any evidence of that. I mean, I think this has been something that's been in the cycle for like the last 20 years of expecting this potential strike. And in my own experiences have always been that there are moments where, especially if Netanyahu wants to push, suddenly there is urgent intelligence. The U.S. intelligence community so far hasn't verified anything. And even more remarkably, I think look, we should be clear-eyed that Iran is a bad actor. We really do not want Iran to get a nuclear weapon. We, a lot of the things that they've done in the region, whether it's support for Hezbollah, support for Hamas, like these are all very bad things. We need to counter them. And and it's important to also, Israel is an ally. It's important to be defending Israel. However, the moment we are dealing with, there was a diplomatic negotiation ongoing between the U.S. and Iran. One that Donald Trump, it was a very pleasant surprise that this is something he was interested in doing. And yet somehow we're not at that moment of decision. And Netanyahu kind of takes it out of Trump's hands, boxes the president in, and launches this strike. And now, like, we're on a very different slippery slope here. The one thing I'll say is still, at the end of the day, the best way to prevent Iran from getting a nuclear weapon is a deal. Even now, even at this moment, it's still a diplomatic deal that puts the kind of constraints on Iran's nuclear program that stop it from getting a bomb. Like, that option is still potentially on the table. I think it's a lot harder. It's unfortunate we had to go to war at this moment, but that option had not been exhausted. If we really were at a moment where all the other options were exhausted and there really was compelling evidence that the U.S. intelligence community agreed with, that much of the rest of the world could agree with, like, there's an argument to be made for military strikes, but this was clearly premature.
Right. Just to underscore a few points you made. First of all, this is Taco Trump at his worst, getting spun around. First, he was in favor of peace. Then he was in favor of helping Israel. Now he may be wanting to go. This is chaos. And this is Trump getting spun by who's ever there. Secondly, he left the G7, where, oh, by the way, our strongest allies all were, to go handle this. I don't know any other president who wouldn't have used that opportunity to get everyone in a consensus. And lastly, Americans do not want this. The latest poll says only 16% of Americans want us directly involved. I don't know any president who has launched a war with 16% support. And by the way, only 19% of his core supporters want this. So, Alon, just as we begin to pivot to domestic issues, does any of this make sense from a political, a strategic, or even a domestic politics? Or is this just Donald Trump wanting to be like big man on campus and get some better news?
Yeah, I think, look, this is very classic Trump. He thought about step one, but not about step 2, 3, 4, and 5. And the reality is now we're stuck in a situation. Israel has inflicted a lot of damage on Iran. It's been a very impressive early operation. But, while it's been impressive operationally, like, there's still Iran's most important nuclear facility is Fordo. Israel can't reach that facility. Only the U.S. can reach that facility. So now we're stuck in a position where if we don't act, there's been this massive antagonistic step taken and all this chaos and all this motivation for Iran to go to a bomb. But if we do act, we're in it. And like, this is a terrible, absolutely terrible position for us to be in. And any other leader, certainly Joe Biden, certainly, Barack Obama and others, would have thought about that step too. It's why when the Israelis, like, this has been going on since the early 2000s, like, Ehud Olmert tried to get George Bush to support a strike on Iran, and Bush said no. Like, Bibi tried to get Obama. Bibi tried to get, Biden. And time after time again, we said no, because like once you go beyond the first step, like here's where you end up. So it's confusing to me. It's really a sign of Trump being bullied and bamboozled and not really being strategic.
What a good point. Trump is the easiest of marks. He always is. Ben, right now, the Republicans have a mess on their hands in the reconciliation bill. This was supposed to be the cornerstone of their entire program. Tax cuts for the rich. Yahoo! Taking health care away from poor people, just their kind of cup of tea. But now that the bill is hugely unpopular among people who know what's in it, and Trump is now not engaged at all because he can only do one thing at a time, and he's busy deciding whether he wants to drag us into a war or not. What happens with the bill? Can Republicans figure this out on their own? I mean, this thing is sort of a mess right now.
This is a flaming disaster. And the reality is, I think there's a sense in which political power and energy and momentum is unitary. It's like Trump has this, the far right has this idea of the unitary executive, that all power is vested in the executive. Well, the reality is when you're pursuing an incredibly unpopular war that unites Democrats against taking disastrous action without congressional approval, and splits the MAGA caucus, which
Right.
Trump was the guy who said we shouldn't have gone into Iraq. And here he is. He came in, he tore up a deal to stop Iran from developing a nuclear weapon just because Obama had done it, which is something that, passed under Obama and was a landmark achievement. Now Trump has put the United States in this position. He's done the exact opposite of what he promised. He said he was going to swagger around so strongly that people wouldn't launch wars and military strikes because they'd be afraid of crossing him. It's the exact opposite. The thing that every other U.S. president has been able to forestall, he has failed to forestall. And now we're in this disastrous situation. And that split in the GOP caucus around this is also going to hurt his ability to pass this massive tax cut for the ultra rich. So what we're seeing right now is a huge uprising in the public. I mean, we saw the No Kings protest this weekend,
Yes.
Millions of people in the streets. Signs all over the country that people totally oppose this bill. Massive public opposition. This is, again, dividing the Republican base and uniting Democrats and independents in opposition to this big, horrible, ugly bill. And a mess of a procedure in the Congress. So every Republican in the House cast the deciding vote on the first draft of the bill. Every one of them will have that hung around their necks when they get to the midterm elections in 2026. But now they're going to have to vote again, and potentially a series of other votes, procedural votes, all these different things for provisions that will make us poorer as a country, that will transfer money from the vast majority of Americans to the ultra wealthy. Provisions that'll kick millions, like double-digit millions of Americans off of their health insurance, and at every level, a completely indefensible spaghetti soup of the worst kind of plutocracy and kleptocracy imaginable. It's basically legislative looting. This is a problem for them. Even if it passes, they all lose, because then they're all going to own something that is just like infuriating to the American public. And if it doesn't pass, then they have the additional problem of the people that bankrolled the whole thing. I don't know where Elon Musk is at this point, but the rest of the kind of plutocrat cabinet is going to be infuriated that they didn't get their return on investment that they were promised when they poured all this hundreds of millions each into Trump's campaign. So they have a problem. And the people who are in the streets, the people who are calling Congress every day, which, by the way, Congressional Switchboard 202-224-3121, great phone number, might be worth writing down. 202-224-3121. It just rolls off the tongue. People who are calling Congress right now, the energy is on your side. The longer you slow down this bill, the longer they go through contortions to try to maneuver it through one chamber that then makes it toxic in the other chamber, the less chance that they can pass it at the end. We saw this with healthcare in 2017. So fight on. This is the moment.
Absolutely. And I think what you said couldn't be more true. The longer it takes, the more they try to, it's like Jell-O. They push on one side and it goes out the other end. The Senate made the Medicaid cuts worse. So you now have the Republican senator from West Virginia joining with the Republican senator from Missouri, joining with all the Democrats saying, what are you doing? This is not going to work. This is madness. Plus, Republicans say they love that dynamic scoring. What did CBO say yesterday? $3.4 trillion added to the debt. So who likes this? And the answer is billionaires like this because they get massive tax cuts. Now, it's interesting. Democrats, sort of get all over themselves and get down in the mouth. We're not communicating. We don't get our message out. In fact, the message is out there. People agree with us. How do they then translate that in 2025? We have important elections, and 2026 and beyond. How do they take that dislike of what Trump is doing and turn that into turnout and Democratic votes?
So there's kind of a three-part recipe for this. And I'll say that the most eloquent language in politics is votes. So when you go out and you win a special election, when you make sure that Democrats sweep a trifecta in Virginia in the elections this November, those votes echo through the halls of Congress. Members of Congress watch those very carefully because those can be an omen about what's to come in 2026. And the more we're on the march right now, the more Democrats are winning elections, and the more people who oppose this within Republican parties are winning primaries, the more it saps the kind of political courage or willingness to do terrible, terrible things among members of the Republican caucus. So don't sleep on the political question. We can see, in Wisconsin, we voted against Elon Musk and his preferred Supreme Court candidate, and now he is out of the White House and feuding with Trump. And there's a lot of reporting that election, that moment was the thing that really turned in his relationship with Trump. So it is a real thing to get ready to gear up, to recruit great candidates, to run for office yourself. If you're watching this right now and you think maybe this is your moment, the politics ultimately is going to hinge on elections, but the other pieces are critical as well. The more people share information, post things to your friends, text information to people, the more you make phone calls to Congress, and that advocacy, the more this bill becomes unpopular and the more Republican members start to waver. Within the Republican coalition, and this happens in both parties, there are individual members who are on the fence about whether they want to support it. And the more they see public opposition, the more their phones light up, the more they get scared and look for, cover and try to demand additional measures that will allow them to vote for it. But just like you were saying, Jennifer, the more you add a piece to get this member to vote for it, the more this other member opposes it. And so the more complex the legislation gets, because all these members are demanding little changes and little carve-outs, the more you potentially steer the whole thing into an iceberg. So that pressure really does matter. We had our state party convention in Wisconsin this past weekend. I was on stage with Senator Tammy Baldwin, who's supporting the No War with Iran Act, by the way. Very, very excited. She's doing great work there. But she said that her phones used to be getting 50 to 100 calls a day. Now it's like 500 to 1,000. There is a level of public fury that is flooding Washington, D.C. from people across the country that probably a lot of contrarians right now are helping to fuel.
Yes.
And members of Congress know it. Their staff have to pick up the phone every time it rings. They have to get back to people. Keep that heat on. If democracy dies in darkness, it can thrive and regrow if we bring the sunlight of public attention and public pressure. So keep making those calls. And then the last thing I would say is find the people who are doing critical work, advocacy, the way that you're supporting the contrarian, support them, because it's not just enough to counter the people that are trying to make things worse. You got to help the people that are doing things right. And the stronger we come out of this, I think the bigger opportunity we have as soon as we win Congress to start putting some actual oversight and checks on this administration. Flipping state houses across the country, winning Democratic trifectas allows us to lock down the security and integrity of our electoral system before 2028, whatever shenanigans the Republicans have in store. And then we'll start the real work of governing, taking lessons from everything they've done to actually build something better.
Absolutely. Alon, that public pressure works in foreign policy as well, doesn't it? I mean, if these Republicans start hearing from their constituents, we didn't sign up for this, we didn't want a war, and Democrats start hearing, listen, we are pro-Israel, we support Israel, but we don't want a war. Does that translate in the minds of lawmakers? And frankly, does the White House begin to hear that as well?
Yes. And I think that's exactly what I was going to echo on Ben's point. When you're making those calls to the switchboards, there's a number of pieces of legislation that are now coming up over the next few days. Senator Kaine in the Senate, Ro Khanna, together with Tom Massey, a bipartisan, basically legislation that is saying, that before the U.S. can strike Iran, Congress needs a say, Congress needs a role, like there needs to be an authorization for the use of military force. That doesn't prevent the U.S. from providing Israel with this defensive support in terms of shooting down, missiles that are flying at Israel. But this is about if you're going to strike at the Fordo facility, if you're going to strike in Iran, Congress has to exercise its power. This is a major decision to go to war with a country of 90 million people. And that's not just done by fiat by Donald Trump, even if he thinks he can do that. And you see this division happening too. I'd advise everyone to watch an interview, Tucker Carlson and Ted Cruz, a remarkable clip. You see like the MAGA coalition crumbling over this and just really fighting it out over this issue too. And because this is not what they voted for either. So I think Republicans need to hear this too. Democrats need to hear this. And there's going to be this fear like there was before the Iraq War. We can't possibly be like, reality is 70% of the American public is not for this, is not for the U.S. getting involved. So it's a very safe political ground for our members of Congress to just be saying, there has to be a vote before we go to war.
Right.
Like Article 2, like very straight, some straight, simple stuff,
Exactly. And that, Alon, is one of the big points we have made at the Contrarian. Part of our constitutional crisis here is that the first branch of government, the Congress, has not been doing its job. They've been little pawns, little lackeys for Donald Trump. Well, they have a role and they have a responsibility, and voters will hold them responsible if they slash Medicaid, if they give huge hunking tax cuts to the rich, if they take us to a war when there are all alternatives. So I think, folks, you always ask what you can do. Thank you a million times, maybe 5 million times for turning out on No King's Day. But that's the beginning. That's the next stage. The next stage after that is keeping the pressure up, saying that there are going to be consequences for members who don't reflect their constituents' views. So we are in the fight of our lives, and I think we have a good chance to win on both of these fronts. So let me ask our two guests what they are looking forward to today and this week. Alon, what are you looking forward to?
I'm looking forward to hopefully not having a U.S. strike on Iran. I thought it might happen last night. And so the fact that it didn't happen last night made me feel better. I'm also looking forward to hopefully all this starting to cool down. The last couple of days, we've seen the Iranians launching less missiles at Israel than we had the first few days. So I'm really thinking about friends, family, loved ones in Israel, and, friends and family of friends of mine who have people in Iran too. So that's, maybe a little more serious than the usual looking forward to.
That's okay. That's serious too. What are you looking forward to, Ben?
I'm very much looking forward with Elon to not having this war and having, frankly, a bipartisan coalition opposing a terrible kind of sleepwalk, or I don't know what the word would be, into another giant Middle East war that could be prevented with diplomacy, and has been for decades prevented with diplomacy. That, the good news is that prediction after prediction that there's about to be a nuclear breakthrough has been forestalled and proven wrong through a lot of diplomatic work, including Elon's work. So we don't have to do this, and backing away from that ledge will be extremely satisfying. The other thing I'm looking forward to is to a point that you made before. The Congressional Budget Office has now scored this bill that's moving through Congress, and yesterday it came out that not only does it have the multi-trillion-dollar impact that it's intended to, but also because it raises the deficit so much, there's another, I think, $391 billion that it'll cost because we're paying interest on this gigantic deficit. That is just starting to ripple out to the country. So I'm looking forward to an even more intense wave of public outcry against this big, horrible bill, and to Republican defections where they say, nope, this is too much. I'm not going to do it. When you see those folks, lift them up and amplify them and hold them to it. I think this could be a critical week in the path to killing this terrible bill and saving a lot of people's lives who would otherwise lose their health insurance and potentially pass away. Let's go on offense.
Absolutely. I am looking forward to the strangest of bedfellows when Rand Paul puts his arm around the shoulder of AOC and says no to the reconciliation bill. He doesn't want the debt. She doesn't want the Medicaid. And they both say there shouldn't be a war. When you have someone like Nancy Pelosi, who has always been a strong friend of Israel, but says, we should give diplomacy a chance. Go over to a MAGA Republican and say, don't you think the president should come ask us, the Congress? That's what politics is. You have to find your allies, make your coalitions. Now is not a time to be picky about the reasons why people might be with us. Whatever the reason, if they're going to vote against the reconciliation, if they're going to demand that Congress get involved, that's somebody that on this issue you can support. And even our contrarians are putting the congressional number in the chat. So you guys are the best. And your subscriptions not only help us bring programming, but of course help Norm with his litigation. In fact, he's back in court again this week. And we cannot thank you enough. So Ben, Alon, thank you so much. And Contrarians, you guys have a great day. Take care.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks all.